today as we focus on a really special guest, award-winning producer, a party of five, Aspirus, and the humbling. Mahal is with us as our guest today, and so thankful to have her joining with her amazing expertise and years of experience in TV. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thanks for having me, Ashley.
Mahal, you have been through a lot with the scripted television, and I wanted to know, because TV is completely different than feature films. What is your story arc of how you got into television, that type of writing environment?
There's no one way to break into the industry, as a wise friend of mine once said to me when I first moved out to LA at 21 years old. There's sort of two sides to that question. The first is, how do you get your foot in the door? And the second is, how do you get to be a good enough writer that when your foot is in the door, you know what you're doing, right? There are a lot of different paths that you can take. I'll answer the first question first in terms of the logistical side, which is that the way that I personally broke in was with a film called The Humbling. Al Pacino had this passion project, and the writer, who was super legendary, wasn't turning in the pages, and the option of the book was about to expire. And so I came in and basically wrote it for free. Then I got the opportunity to workshop the script with Barry Levinson, who was the director, and Al Pacino, who was the producer and star. And that pretty much launched my career. So it was really cool to help them, who were such, both of them Oscar titans of the industry and have made such quality films and legends, to have them mentor me and to have the opportunity to help bring Pacino's passion project to life. And then from there, that just opened the door to a bunch of other opportunities. So from there, I got my first job writing on staff of a TV series. I quickly found out that the way to actually earn a living in scripted content is through TV more than film. I wish I had listened to that. Wish I had listened to that in my most recent endeavors making an independent feature film. But anyway, sometimes passion outweighs anything else, which is another good tip
Exactly.
for any creatives that are passionate about a story that they're telling. There's nothing more powerful than the storyteller's passion to get a project made and to get a project out there to the world. Then from there, once I already had a couple credits, and actually I can't remember the exact order of things, but at some point I started selling TV series. I sold a show to Amazon. I sold, more recently, a show to AMC. I worked on the Party of Five reboot, where I worked with the original creators, revamped the original characters to a new modern Latin version of themselves. And so I was involved in that project from redeveloping the characters, redeveloping the story, selling the project back to Sony and to Freeform and Hulu. That was my kind of way in. I would say for others, and a lot of my friends around me at the time broke in by getting a job as a writer's assistant on a TV series, which you could start by being a PA. My bestie at the time, it was like my roommate when we first moved out to LA, he got a job as like a PA on Scrubs or something like that. It was like a post-production PA. He would deliver the DVDs to the people, for the big fancy people. And then from there, he worked his way to writer's PA. And then from there, he worked his way to writer's assistant. And eventually he was writing on the show. And now he's like a super talented, successful comedy writer. So to me, that almost is a more direct path, because you get the privilege of learning, having like a grad school as the writer's assistant. Writer's assistant is inside of the writer's room while the writers are coming up with the story. So your brain starts to learn how that works. Whereas for me, it felt a little more like jumping in the deep end to get a job like that and feel a little bit like not playing catch up, but it's just really hard to be able to think on the spot creatively. In television, that's what a lot of TV is, that there are these writers' rooms of anywhere from 5 to 10 writers, all just pitching ideas on the spot, creative ideas. So that to me feels like what I would recommend for anyone trying to break in. Just get a job, look at the listings of what kind of PA, especially if you're like just out of college or in college. When I was in college, I interned. I cold called a bunch of places like Warner Brothers, Silver Pictures, Ridley Scott's company. I was like, hey, I'm calling to inquire about an internship. I would say find the top 30 companies that you'd want to work at and just cold call and just introduce yourself with confidence and say you're inquiring about an internship and see if anyone will let you come intern. And that's a great way to get your foot in the door and meet people, and then they can hook you up with a job when you graduate, or if you already graduated, that will quickly lead to a job if you just show up, be professional, be a good vibe, contribute, ask yourself, how can you add value? It'll get you pretty far. I would definitely say those are some tips for those of you looking to break into the industry. Now, the second side of that question is, how do you get to be a good enough writer to actually, when you have the opportunity, to make sure that you're ready for it? And I remember, I think it's John August that has this like a blog mentorship website, and he wrote on there that it takes 5 years of practice until you're a good enough writer to actually be a working writer. And I remember reading that when I was like 19, being like, 5 years, that's forever. Like, it's not going to take me that long. And sure enough, 5 years later, I got my first paid writing gig. So I would say just keep at it, keep practicing, read the masters, study screenplays, study story masters, read screenwriting books. There's a very specific structure. It's a little different for film than TV, but it's basically the same muscle. So study and learn, right? I didn't study film in college. I studied narrative arts and more like comparative literature, cognitive science, but I definitely taught myself. And by the way, someone like Al Pacino also taught himself. So there's a lot of learning that you can do just about your craft. And this applies if you're a director. Sean Baker shot a movie on an iPhone. Like, there's a lot you can do to study and learn. If it's writing, directing, producing, just kind of documentary filmmaking, which I also have a history in, just go for it. Make something, start writing, start directing, start filming documentary stuff, and also read from the masters of what they advise and how they explain structure and technique in whichever discipline rings true for you the most.
No, I totally agree with that. Learning from the masters is something that's very important because they've already been there, done that, right? And they've gotten there's a lot of really cool ways to put things out there, but if they're not based off of something that's going to sell, if it's not going to be packageable or anything to that effect, like, you're not going to be able to get super far. So learn from those hits, those ones that have gone a ways. That way you can overcome a lot of rookie mistakes, starting out. So what is one of the biggest things that you learned from Al Pacino? That was a huge writing gig for you to have, getting to work with him, doing the feature for Humbling. And then you went right into a very intense writing world of doing more of story arcing in TV and more of an episodic type environment. What was one of the biggest things that you learned from him?
I remember learning from him that writers and actors are opposite sides of the same coin. I also learned about improv. He's someone who loves to improv, and he's good at it. A lot of writers can be very precious about their exact words. I almost learned the opposite of that watching him, and we would sit and go over the monologue together. For example, one of the key monologues that he felt was the heart of the movie, and he would improvise, and when I would hear him improvise something that would ring true, I would double click on that and then use that to inspire my writing. So I would say one of the biggest things is, it depends on the actor, right? Because some actors, they might not have his level of craft and they might not feel comfortable improvising. But with him, I learned not to be precious about my words, if that makes sense. Because good writing, especially in film and TV, it's all about the situation. So it doesn't really even matter. Don't get me wrong, I love dialogue. I definitely spend time on it. But if an actor is feeling inspired and is improvising something, then I like to embrace that and let the writer, actor, opposite sides of the same coin really work for the story and embrace the collaborative aspect of the filmmaking process.
That's really smart because sometimes there's some really gold moments there that you gotta just let play out. So I think that's a really smart idea from a creative perspective, whether you're directing or producing. Sometimes it's cool to see where they're gonna take something. For those of the people who aren't as fully aware as to what it goes into a writer's room in a TV world, what is the difference from a staff writer, an executive producer, and a showrunner?
Okay, so the writer's room, I think I described that it's usually about anywhere from 5 to 12 or so writers that sit around in a room. By the time you get to 12, usually they might split up the room and say, okay, these 6 people talk about episode 2, and these 6 people talk about episode 3. And we do something called story breaking. So in a feature film, you're just by yourself, or if you're lucky, you have friends that you bounce stuff off of, or a lot of people hire friends, writer friends, to bounce stuff off of. But you could go down, the reason features take so long is you could go down a rabbit hole and there's a logic bump and the story doesn't really work. Whereas in TV, someone will tell you that in the room of the 6 other people will tell you, hey, wait, no, we can't do that. It doesn't make emotional sense. There's a bump there. And then, whereas if you're writing a feature film by yourself, it might take you months to come to that same conclusion that you got from a colleague in 5 minutes. So yeah, a feature film is more of like a solitary process, whereas a TV writer's room is more of a team sport. And I've been in writer's rooms where it's 6 people and everyone is working together, coming up with a story. And then, like I said, there are larger writers' rooms too, which usually are on more procedural, like on Castle, for example. Those are larger writers' rooms because you can divide the episodes and divide and conquer. But to answer your direct question, the staff writer is the first entry level writer's room position. Then above that is the story editor. And then above that, I think it's, if I'm not mistaken, like executive story editor and then producer and then co-EP and then EP. When you go up that ladder, it's more and more responsibility and generally translates to more and more experience. So if you're at a co-EP or EP level, you've usually written a lot or some fusion of, like me, for example, I didn't have that many years under my belt when I stepped into a co-EP position, but I did have a senior role in having created the series. So that's usually how it works. And then the showrunner is the writer, usually the writer that wrote the first episode or the writer that came up with the concept, but not always. And the showrunner is leading the trains, not only of the writer's room, but of all the departments, hiring the showrunner in charge of bringing the vision to life. And it's a head writer that leads, steers the writer's room, and also is in charge of the directors, casting, because it's different directors that come in for each episode. So the showrunner would be the one hiring them. Then the different, all the different departments, it's maybe like 100 or 200 people, depending on the budget size, maybe even more. So the showrunner is kind of in charge of hiring all those department heads and steering the ship and in charge of holding the vision of the show.
There's a lot of moving parts that goes into it, and not one person is necessarily responsible for all of it, but you do have the leaders and the heads that can come down with, hey, we're doing this now, so go ahead and rewrite everything to fit this story arc that we're working with right there, which can be very interesting for sure. That's a whole different world. It's very fast-paced and a competitive environment. So you have done writing, you've done production, directing, and you've also done film packaging. You've sold films. So what has been your favorite experience out of all of that? I know you're producing right now, which is a whole different world. We're going to get to that. I'm so excited to hear about your baby. But tell us, like, what has been your favorite experience so far and why?
Favorite. It's like asking to pick a favorite child is like.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, they all have their heart pulls on the shoulder.
Maybe the first one only because I got to really focus on the creative process and I was working with such veterans. I think part of I definitely prefer the creative part, like actually bringing the vision to life, whether it's on the written page or as a director, translating the written page to what actually appears on screen. And it feels, for me, when I get to really dive into more the creative side and less the business side, that's my favorite part. But because of the nature of the TV and film industry, it's never exactly like that. Like, you can't just be all creative. It's like, for example, on my Cuba project, which is the project I'm making now, it's like there was a whole chapter around like fundraising, like packaging, building the team, building from scratch. The world of independent film is quite challenging.
Mm.
So the best part is, and maybe my favorite part was making the short film for the Cuba project, which was a really positive experience that I shot here in Puerto Rico with a lot of amazing local talent here on the ground. That was a very positive and rewarding experience. And it's already also my favorite experience of creatively the feature film version of it. So, yeah, I think that answers that.
No, that does answer it. It's a good there's so many different kids that you've got, right? That you've been able to help train and bring along, and so you can't really pick one specifically, but I am very excited to hear about your most recent project and excursion that you've got. You've been inspired by this by your trip to Cuba, and you got roots there. So tell us a little bit about this project that you have coming up. Really cool, and give us a little bit of, I know, what inspired you from your trip to create this film.
Yeah, so the film is called Cuba Paraiso. Paraiso means paradise in Spanish, and it's a little bit of an ironic title, but also not. At the time, I was living in LA. I was just broken by modern dating, the digital world. I had bleeding ulcers, and a friend of mine was like, "You're not sick. You live in a sick society. Come to Cuba." And so Cuba is the one place in the world without technology. So it's a whole generation of people, no Instagram, no Tinder, no porn. They don't know who the Kardashians are. And instead of being constantly scrolling,
Yeah.
they have presence that's powerful, and you feel it, and it's visceral, and it's like an untapped human potential and life force that changed my life. And the way that they interact with each other, the passion, the salsa, that they'll be dancing in the middle of the street is just unlike anything you've ever seen. It's like Paris frozen in time, but more passionate and more full of life. And we don't realize here in the West, I didn't realize how much of my attention has been sucked away from my own consciousness, right? What's happening is that your attention is for sale on these devices and on a lot of these apps, if it's social media or dating apps or whatever. And as a result of that, we wonder why humanity is in crisis from the mental health perspective, anxiety, skyrocketing, teen suicide, depression, substance abuse is all skyrocketing. And it's very closely linked to our brains being rewired through these algorithms that are designed to make us feel, for example, not enough, or to skew towards one political position or another, because there's advertisers that are paying for your attention, and every minute of your attention online is literally sold for millions of dollars, according to a very high level executive who remains anonymous, but of a top technology company. And so that's a little bit of what I realized when I got to Cuba, is just how much we are affected by this constant needing to be moving at the speed of technology, this constant swipe, click, instant gratification, dopamine hit culture. We're being robbed of our humanity. We're being robbed of our very basic biological needs like touch, community, connection. And instead, it's being replaced by 2,000 likes, which translate to 0% of the fulfillment and nourishment of an actual hug, right? Or a true, like back in the day, people lived in a village and they didn't have 2,000 friends. They had 3 friends, but they were real friends. And there were deep, and there was substance there. Whereas now we have this surface level, fleeting kind of thing. So that was that. And then another piece I'll say on Cuba is that it's the one place in the world where, because there's no advertising, so there's no shame around sex and there's no shame around people's bodies. And it's a very sensual, sexual, everyone's so confident and they embrace all different body types because they haven't been brainwashed by American advertising because they've never seen it. So the way that sensuality and life force shows up there is so powerful and shocking when you see it compared to like our repressed American selves. So that, to me, that was really powerful as well, just to see the lack of shame around our bodies, around our sexuality that Cubans experience.
Yeah, that would actually be a huge culture shock because if you don't have somebody telling you what's the right thing to look like, who cares? Like, you don't have that unrealistic expectation in the back of your head created in the moment. And it's taking that time from the constant scrolling where you got that Freudian click, right? That something that's constantly hitting, like you said, that dopamine in your body and is causing your brain to basically fracture into multiple different avenues and not be able to keep a steady conversation. It's not able to keep a steady even train of thought. So you're out there chasing all these different little things that are also preached on you, put on you, and all this extra external pressure. And it's a very intense emotional world. And I think that's really smart that you've been able to pull back from that and experience what a real wholesome environment for the mental mind should be like. And so it sounds like you're pulling that into your film as well. How exactly are you showing that side in this film that you're creating?
So the experience of the film is the opposite of our numb American digital world, right? It's the first, for those of you who are writers in the audience, the first 7 pages of the script of the film take place in the old world. Miami, the main characters, numb, close-hearted. There's 2 people that are hunched over their phones, facing away from each other, disconnected. They might be physically in the same room, but they might as well not be. That's where our story starts. And then very quickly, the character is called to Cuba to buy political art from a Cuban Banksy that's fueling the revolution against the government in 2021. And she soon finds, well, yes, there's an aspect of political thriller where she ends up hunted by the Cuban government, but at its heart, she couldn't find connection in the West, in the digital world, until she got to this magical island with no technology, and she's able to connect, both romantically and in sisterhood. So my hope is that, and my wish with the film, my intention is that people will see it, and obviously it's very much inspired by my journey. It's based on a true story about art fueling the 2021 revolution, but it's also fused with my own true story of the emotional journey and the emotional freedom I found in my consciousness getting there to Cuba, that is. It's my hope that in sharing my own experience of what it was like to be in a world where to connect to social media or to email or to anything, it's a 20-minute drive away. The freedom and the lift off your consciousness that gives you opens up a whole level of life force and humanity that you might not have known was even possible, or you might have forgotten, or if you were alive before cell phones, maybe there's a deep remembering in there somewhere, right? So it's my hope that in sharing my own experience, and I was feeling dead in LA and just numb and brainwashed by the algorithm and disconnected. And then I got to Cuba and I was feeling alive, open-hearted, passion, connection. And so it's my hope that people will, through connecting with the character's journey, snap out of the spell of technology and the digital algorithm, put down their phones, and simply connect with whoever's right in front of them.
Yeah, that would be amazing.
Yeah. So I'll just share a little about the purpose of the film is to start a global movement to wake people up from the spell of the digital algorithm and reclaim our power with our attention and our ability to connect to each other. It's very simple. And the name of the movement is the Unplugged Movement. And the Unplugged Movement can look different for different people, but my suggestion would be go one community at a time. So for example, if the whole cheerleading squad decides to delete Instagram for a week and instead get together and hang out, and great, you can do that one community at a time. The problem with a lot of these algorithms is that everybody wants to belong. And so if you're just trying to do it by yourself, you can do that, but it's going to be harder, especially for young people, but also for everyone, because everyone wants to belong. And it's one of our most basic human needs, and it's being used against us on social media in the modern world. So if one community at a time, you could find the way to join the Unplugged, and the characters in the film will talk about the Unplugged movement. But if you in your own life can find the way to join the Unplugged, either with those that live in your house or everyone in your community or everyone in your workplace or everyone in your cheerleading squad, you can feel into what works best for you. One good recommendation place to start is, can you make the first hour of your day cell phone free? Or can you make the last hour of your day cell phone free? I try to do both. And I feel like, yeah, both. Ideally, it's like we wouldn't be living in a world where we have to be constantly on our phones, but that's just how the world is. So to add on to that, there's someone named Brittany Kaiser. She's working on a project called Alphaton that lives on the Telegram platform, and that is a platform. Was known for being the main subject of the documentary The Great Hack, which dealt with this issue of how user data is sold to manipulate voters or whatever else. And so she's creating systems on a platform where your attention is not for sale. So I would say it's a two-pronged approach. Number one, it would be great if everything could be in real life and off the phones and off technology. But number two, when you do need to be on technology, to move to a platform that's benevolent, that's not trying to make money off of having you feel not enough or body shaming people or skewing voters in one direction or the other.
Yeah,
so
what it wants you to send. It wants you to see. Yeah.
Yeah. So I would say that's what I would suggest for listeners, even myself. Like, on my own, I can challenge myself to, hey, can you make the first hour of your day cell phone free? I often fail, and I'm leading a movement called the Unplugged Movement. So just to be compassionate with yourself and to know that we are all addicted to technology. It's not good for our mental health. Is there something we can do about it? Yes. I would say whenever possible. So take a full weekend, just unplug.
Yeah.
See if you can do it, or see if you can do it for a day. See if you can do it for the first hour of your day and see how it changes your mental health. And in that first hour, instead, connect to yourself, connect to nature, work out, meditate, connect to a friend, something.
Yeah. No, I agree. What it does is it helps slow your minds down and to be present. That's one of the reasons why meditation has gotten to be something that's so important, because it helps you stop. It helps you not need to feel like you're something just because you have a notification on your phone, and to help pull you into the real world as to who you are in that moment. And it takes off so much pressure and stress.
Yeah.
I'm slightly a crusader for this in certain ways as well. So
Really? Tell me more.
I actually unplugged for a while,
Really?
a couple years ago, and it helps clear my mental status and helped me be able to think on such a deeper level. My creative side came out so much more, and I felt like I had less of an exhaustion. And every time now that I've pulled away from, as much as I can, right? You still have to work. You still have to be able to connect with people and talk to people and stuff. Unfortunately, we're not able to completely always unplug, but doing that for certain periods of time, man, it helps your mental, emotional health by knowing that you are like this time frame from this time frame, or this weekend, I'm not going to look at my phone. I'm going to just put it away in a box or something like that and not look at it, because it creates higher blood pressure. I don't know. That's what it feels like sometimes, right?
Totally. Yeah. It's designed to do that.
Yeah.
You're not wrong. Yeah. That's what it's designed to do, to get a rise out of you. Because that's what valuable in terms of clickbait.
Exactly. And you feel so much better and so much more wholesome. And then when you go and just talk to people and you're like, wow, this is so refreshing. And my whole mental status feels so much better. So, yeah, I'm a big, maybe not huge, but I'm a big perpetrator of getting away and just having your own time. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. I appreciate you sharing all that. You're a huge wealth of information on the entire experience from creating the very roots of a film, which is through the idea and then turning it into a script that's going to spark interest and get either studios on board or film executives that can help get it funded. And then taking it from there to the next level. And then you got the episode and the story arc, the writer's room experience. There's so much stuff that you have done, lots of different features and TV series that you have worked on. So it's just really a huge wealth of information, and I appreciate you sharing that today. Are there any ways that we can help support this film and follow you guys? I know there's potentially a webpage that will be coming out, but is there any other way that they can help get this ball rolling for you as you're endeavoring this project?
Yeah, I would say anyone that is interested in, first of all, yeah, I would say you can follow along. We're going to have ironically, social media page. I would say you're only allowed to check it once a week.
Okay.
Once a week is a fair amount of time, I would say. To me, it's a means to an end, right? It's okay, we're only going to use these pages to communicate information so that you can then go out and have IRL connection and etc. But sometimes you need to call it a Trojan horse, call it refine systems from within, right?
Mm-hmm.
In order to make change. So yeah, you can follow my own page, which is Hali Zebede. You can follow the films page, Cuba Paraiso, for updates on the Unplugged movement. And then similarly, we have fiscal sponsorship through our sponsors, the Film Collaborative. So if anybody wants to participate in the film, donate to the film for a chance at a credit, like a special thanks credit or even a producer credit, if you make a big enough donation, you can do that through just Google the Film Collaborative Cuba Paraiso, and you'll be able to donate to the film. And especially if you're wanting to break into the industry, there could be ways for you to have learning or mentorship opportunities through being involved, making a small charitable donation. You could come on set, you could learn. It's a possibility. So just putting that out there for any interested listeners. And mostly, I would just invite you to join the Unplugged movement, find what's true for you. Start with the simple challenge of, can you make your first hour of your day cell phone free, and see how that changes your mental health throughout the day.
I agree. I think that's a really great idea. Unplug and see how it's going to help you feel so much better and just start being able to create and dream again. It's really nice. You are just really inspiring. So thank you so much for sharing your information and your story with us. Are there any last words of wisdom that you like to share with the audience before we end for the day?
Thanks so much for having me, Ashley. I think the last thing I'll share is just, there's nothing more powerful than human determination and passion. So if you want to break into the entertainment industry, don't let anyone tell you can't do it. You can do it. It might take years. It might take a lot of effort, but people can sense, and I feel part of why I've been successful is that people can feel my genuine passion and determination to birth these projects. And a lot of it has to do with being on a mission bigger than myself. So it's not, yes, the Cuba film is a sexy thriller and it's going to be entertaining, but also I have a hidden agenda that I like to call chocolate covered broccoli. That's a mission greater than myself, of the Unplugged movement, of helping people get to a better state inside of ourselves, right? Reclaim a piece of humanity that's been lost. So I think when you can have a passion that's connected to a higher good, it's going to help fuel you as a creative. So I would leave that last nugget for the listeners. And thanks so much for having me and for listening.
Absolutely. Super cool. Yeah, when you give up a little bit of screen time, you're actually going to gain a whole heck of a lot.
Totally.
All right. Thank you guys for tuning into the show. We'll see you guys back here next time with our next amazing special guest. Take care.